Hi guys, Thogrey here with a new video, and this video will be my ultimate 3v3 tier list video for Wrath of the Lich King Classic. And it will be somewhat of a long video because I try to discuss every spec and make you understand why I put a certain spec to a certain place. I did a lot of 3v3 with my Paladin, but also I'm on my way playing with my Hunter as well, and I want to share my experiences with you guys. So let's talk about the tier list and how I lay it out. S tier, it means that it is really, really, really strong. I would say God tier. A tier means it is meta. You can really climb with that class, spec, whatever it is. You really can make an impact with that spec. B tier means it is average, it is not bad, it is not good. It is just middle of the pack, and you can really do well depending on the comp you're playing, but also you can do also super bad depending on the comps you might play with that spec. C tier, it means it is underpowered and somewhat carried by a comp. So for example, you can play TSG, but you can play TSG with, let's say, a Fury Warrior, for example. It is very underpowered. You can make it work, I guess, but the Fury Warrior will not carry the games. It will probably be the DK and the Holy Paladin trying to heal them both. A D tier, it means it is garbage, I would say. Um, you should not play that class if you will, or at least that spec, if you want to climb easily, but you can still do if you really so desire. And E tier, it is probably going to be gone because I don't feel like there is a E spec anytime soon. Alright, let's talk about feral druids right now. I'm also going to write everything into the description below, timestamps, so you can actually skip over some specs you would like to hear or hear it back whenever you are doing something and you wanted to hear a specific opinion about a specific spec. Feral druids. Feral are very, very strong, very surprisingly strong actually. They are squishy. They do die really quickly if they are cat form and they are stunned into uh, cat form. Of course, they do get a reduced damage dealt whenever they are stunned, like an astral shift or some sort, but it is still very squishy. It doesn't have a shield like, let's say, a elemental shaman. So astral shift plus the physical damage reduction of said shield makes elemental shamans very, very tanky for physical damage users. But for feral druids, they are really squishy outside of that, and sometimes they just die outside of stun. They will have to go bear form if they want to survive. Bear form doesn't do as much as on retail, and that's why for me it is A tier spec. It has instant cyclones, it can off heal a bit, it has innervate, so the healer might just survive a bit longer with a bit more mana. But the problem is, Feral Druid outside of their Berserk, they are very, very squishy, very, very killable. And of course, they have great comps, and that's why for me it's a meta spec. But it is not a S tier spec where it is automatic loss if you're facing a Feral Druid. That's not going to happen. BM Hunter, and for me, BM Hunter are surprisingly good. I've faced a few BM Hunters. The only problem they have is their pets are dying super quickly, but with the amount of armor at the disposal, the amount of resilience, and they can actually build armor pen, you can do something good with a BM Hunter. They have also great comps, and that's why for me they are B tier. They do have aim shot or scatter shot if they play around that. I don't know if it's going to be something meta to go for scatter shot. I think aim shot is probably better, but they have a MS effect, and not every spec has an MS effect. And I feel like BM Hunter as a whole are very strong whenever their pets are surviving, but whenever their pets die, that becomes a very, very hard task for them to come back into the game, and that's why for me it is a B tier spec. Survival Hunter, for me, they are also very good, but also very bad. They need a bit more time to do damage. They do have aim shot as well because they don't go for the BM tree. I think they are just a tad bit better than BM Hunters, because they are not as reliant on pets, and they do have good damage. It just needs to build up over time. It doesn't have like a one-shot mechanic that some specs have. But that's why for me it's a A tier spec, because let's say Feral Druid with a Hunter, which is Jungle Cleave, is really, really good, although not really played a lot on the ladder because the Hunters are really, really rare, but also Feral Druids too. When you face one that has like a good coordination with good Disc Priest, it becomes very, very hard to actually win those games because they do have crazy CC, and CC in Wrath of the Lich King is quite long if you're like not having any tools to actually deal with that CC. Marksmanship Hunter, I'm going to put it in S tier. Very simple. It has a silence. It has a aim shot, which is an MS effect as well. They have camera shot, which is hurting a lot, and I think MM are going to be better and better over time. I'm talking about 3v3, but we can also talk about 5v5. And 5v5, MM has really a place into the meta because you don't really need a warrior anymore in 5v5. You can go with a hunter with their MS effect, and you can really have a win condition with the aim shot going for the kill target. So all in all, I feel like MM hunters are just a tad bit better than survival and much better than BM because they do have a silence, and silencing a healer while they are on a like whenever they have a problem, I would say, healing their targets, it becomes very deadly whenever you get a good silencing shot and you're playing with a warrior, for example, and he's going ham on the DPS. They are about to die, right? They have also access to scatter shot, the same as survival, but more easily than, let's say, a BM hunter. A BM hunter that has to go for scatter shot do lose on the MS effect from aim shot. I'm sorry because there is a bit of noise in my home, but we have now Protection Paladin, which I'm going to discuss as Preg and Paladin together. I would say Preg is something a whole lot different. I don't know if I'm going to discuss it right now because I feel like Preg in Season 5 is not as prevalent. You will not see a lot of Preg players because they don't have a lot of crit, and you need to have huge amounts of crit, and let's talk about Protection Paladin right away. I feel like Protection Paladin is a class, a spec that is very annoying to play against. They do have a space in the meta where you're playing with a Disc Priest, you're playing with a warrior, and you're here to actually help the warrior score a kill. Because you do have a silence, you do have some damage, you do have the utility of a paladin, you do have also some healing at your disposal. Having Hammer of Justice every 30 seconds is also very big for the warrior because you can do some big setups for your team where your Protection Paladin can stun the healer, which often they don't have a solution to get them out of stun. Like, for example, Trinket is possible, but also a Dispel if they are not playing with a Retribution Paladin or a Shadow Priest, it becomes very hard to actually dispel your healer. If they are stunning the healer and then the priest walks up, fears, I mean, it becomes very hard to actually survive, right? So for me, it's a B tier spec. By itself, it's not super strong. I feel like a Retribution Paladin is probably better in most situations. It does have some good comps, like for example, Warrior with a Disc Priest, or you play with a Marksmanship Hunter, still possible because you can have a lot of damage from the Marksmanship Hunter, and the Freedom does help the Marksmanship Hunter, for example. And also a stun. A stun is also always nice for a hunter to lay a trap, for example, or whatever the situation calls you, right? So B tier. Assassination rogues in threes, they are not as good as in twos because you do need to switch your targets. The good thing is you have more targets means that you have less like the you are less likely to poison three targets. To having two targets poisoned is a possibility in twos. In threes, it's a bit less of a possibility to poison three targets, so you can still have a blind on a specific target. But I feel like it's so hectic that you don't have the tools that the Celebrity Rogue has. You have the damage is still very, very prevalent, and you can make it work, and that's why for me it's a C tier spec. It could be B tier, but for me it's a C tier spec because Like I said, it is underpowered and can work with specific comps. Is it carrying that comp? Probably not, because you could go stability and probably do better. But it is still here. It is still having the tools that a rogue has, like blind, sap, kidney shot, whatever you can actually do to control the game. That's possible. But you don't have the escape tools like a stability rogue. You're more squishy, I would say, because again, preparation and having two vanishes, double evasion, or whatever you can have to actually survive is very big as a sub rogue. And for assassination rogues, they don't have that aspect. Also, not having shadow step is very big in trees, because getting slowed is something that is going to happen, and having shadow step to actually do a shadow step kidney is super interesting. The thing is, assassination becomes very good whenever your combo points does transport to another target. Like for example, you're building on one and then you kidney shot the other. That's not the case in Wrath of the Lich King at the moment. So for me, it is a C tier spec. Subtlety Rogue, for me, it's an A tier spec. It has crazy amounts of damage, but it is not like Shadowlands where you're going to survive damage anyhow. It is going to die if you're not playing carefully. You can one-shot people, you can control the game, you have tools to run away, but it is not like Shadowlands or retail for that matter, where you can just run away all the time without a sweat, right? That's not going to happen. So you need to finish off your targets. You can't really stay in combat too long, but your Shadow Step and your Shadow Dance can help you to tip you over the edge and actually do crazy amounts of damage, right? Protection Warrior, it's I think on in the same boat as Protection Paladin. The comps can do very well for Protection Paladin. You still have Protection Warrior, you still have the crazy damage, but in PvP, in arenas, most people have Resilience. And whenever you have Resilience, it makes it a bit more difficult to actually one-shot people. You just see the difference between a protection warrior in a BG of a 70, like a level 79 BG, where they are one-shotting people, and then whenever they're level 80 and they're facing versus other people that are actually also geared towards PvP, they starts to fall off, and it becomes better with armor pen in the future patches, but also with trinkets. It has a lot more one-shot potential, but in this season, I feel like it's still average, and I prefer to play at least versus a Protection Warrior than, let's say, a Arms Warrior. Although Protection Warrior has stuns, a lot of people, a lot of specs have stuns, and it will be DR'd anyways. Fury Warrior, that's what I wanted to talk about. For me, it's a C tier spec. A lot of people are putting Fury in D tier, but for me, it's not, because it's still a warrior. It still does damage. You might be surprised the amount of damage you can actually get from a Fury Warrior. The only issue is they don't have a reliable MS effect. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to help you at all. The Arms Warrior is just that much better. For me, Fury Warrior is just one of a kind, right? It's so good at doing damage, but doing damage is not everything in arenas. And that's why for me it's C tier. It still can work in TSG, it can work in KFC, it can work with a paladin, but is it the optimal spec? Not really. Does it do damage? Yes, but is it enough? Not really. And that's why for me it's a C tier spec. Warrior, Arms Warrior, it's S tier. I mean, I think it's the king of the melees at the moment with the next classes that next specs I'm going to discuss. Arms Warrior is just very strong. It has a Blade Storm, which can get disarmed, but not every spec has a disarm. It has crazy amounts of damage. It has the possibility to Mortal Strike to actually get a 50% reduced healing on the target, but also with Overpower, while they are actually casting, they get reduced healing or damage while they are finishing whenever they finish the casting. So it means that it is not cumulative. It is multiplicative, so it will be 50% times 50%, it will be 75%. So you basically don't heal at all. So if you have a 10k healing going on, it's going to be a 2.5k healing. And trust me, 2.5k is really nothing. And I'm like exaggerating the numbers. It might be even lower, right? And that's why for me it is just an S tier. It's just too strong. It has shield wall. It has die by the sword, which is super strong versus rogues, for example. You have a lot of great tools. I just feel like Arms Warrior is the ideal melee that you can have in your team, and that's why it's also played with any class, any spec. You can play with an Elemental Shaman, you can play with an Enhancement Shaman, you can play with a Retribution Paladin, you can play with a DK, any DK spec. You can play even with a Rogue, you can even play with a Marksmanship Hunter, Survival Hunter, BM Hunter. You can play with any spec, and that's why for me it is the most S tier spec out there. If I had to choose one spec, it would be Arms Warrior. Combat Rogues, for me, it's the first D tier spec. The only problem is Killing Spree is one hell of a ability. It does a lot of damage. But the problem is, it is random. If you have pets near you, if you have other enemies near you, you're going to Killing Spree everyone. And it's not going to go only on one target. It could, but it is random, and I feel like randomness is not good in Wrath of the Lich King. And that's why for me it's a D tier spec. You can still make it work, but for me it's just garbage. I think if I have to think, I think it's the only spec I'm going to put in D tier, because literally their USP, their unique selling point of that spec is Killing Spree, and Killing Spree just becomes worse with the more enemies you face. That's why in 2v2 it has a space, it has a place in the meta, I would say, if you really so want to play a combat rogue. Did I say outlaw? Sorry, it's a combat rogue. But combat rogues are just not great. It just is what it is. Whenever your Killing Spree is not working, you're just a worse subtlety rogue, and that's why for me it's a D tier spec. Blood Decay. I'm going to put it in C tier. You might be surprised, but it does quite a lot of damage if they manage to have Grim Toll of Grim Battle. I don't even know the trinket that gives armor pen whenever you get a proc, and you get a lot of armor pen. You do a lot of damage with Death Strike and Hard Strike. Hard Strike does hit a lot. You spam Death Strike, and pretty much you have like 6 death runes ready to get the hard strikes back to back, and you can do a lot of damage. You can heal yourself, you can get some good physical damage buff to your warrior. So if you're playing with a warrior, you can put Hysteria on the warrior and he gets a 20% buff on physical damage, which is something that you might not be known with, but it does crazy amounts of damage whenever they get a buff like that. Like, warriors are going to destroy people, and that's why for me it's a C tier spec. It is by itself not a great spec, but if you add it in a great comp, you can do something to help that comp. Will it be the sole reason why the comp is winning? Not really, because you could go Unholy, or you even could go Frost and you will do great. But that Blood Decay has a USP that can give the Arms Warrior or any other physical damage dealer a 20% increased damage dealt, and that's actually very, very nice, especially in arenas. Also, it does damage to himself, so it means if he gets polymorphed or if he gets blinded, he will get out immediately, and that's also a great way to actually get your healer CC free. So you can put it on your healer, let's say a disc priest or a paladin or whatever, and he gets polymorphed. That polymorph will not be working because you can put hysteria on them and he will get freed, right? So you have some tools to actually play around and versus around people. But for me it's a C tier spec because it doesn't have the USPs that, let's say, Frost and DK have. Frost and Unholy DKs have. Frost DK for me, it's... Ooh, that's very hard. For me, it's A tier because it's really strong, but I can understand why people put it in B tier. For me, it's a A tier spec. I'm going to explain why. It has actually crazy damage. It has also CC that Unholy DK don't have. Okay, the Ghoul's turn is quite nice, but the Frost Decay actual freeze on the whole team can make you win a game. So I feel like Frost Decays are underestimated. I would say it's between A and B, but I'm going to put in A tier because I need to make a comparison with the other specs. And I feel like it's just better than Protection Warrior and Protection Paladin. So for me, it's an A tier spec. Unholy DK, it's a S tier spec. It does crazy amounts of damage. If you don't play with a Paladin, it becomes very hard to actually deal with the Gargoyle. Gargoyle by itself does huge amounts of damage if you're not going to deal with it. You need to deal with it. If you're not dealing with the gargoyle, you're going to get 30% increased damage on you, because that's pretty much the damage profiles. A gargoyle, if you're seeing a gargoyle doing free damage, it is going to be 30% of the Unholy Decay's damage on the whole game. And if they get a second gargoyle, then it becomes very, very dangerous. Like, you're not going to survive it because you don't have the mana levels or the defensive CDs for that matter. But for me, Unholy Decay is like the tandem with the Arms Warrior. They are really close to each other. And then you have Marksmanship Hunter and Rogues, which are more specialists. By itself, they're not going to be overwhelming, but they can do really crazy damage. And that's why for me, it's like the family of melees that are going S tier. And I feel like I don't really have any other S tier melees in this patch, I would say. Fire Mage, and Fire Mage, you're going to be surprised. I'm going to put it in A tier. It's really, really strong if they have the time to cast, and if they have time to actually do the things that he wants to do, and they are playing with a balance Druid for let's say or Destruction Warlock, whatever, you can really destroy people. I'm going to talk about 5v5 a bit also. 5v5 fire mages, they are crazy, man. They're doubling the damages of other damage dealers, and in general you have the time to actually pop off. In trees you have a bit less time, and then in twos you have like no time to pop off. And that's why for me, trees, if fire mages are really, really scary, I feel like a lot of people will re-roll to fire mage really soon. Venruki did a guide about fire mage and the plus and minuses about that spec. So if you want to check it out, please check it out on Venruki's channel. But really, fire mages, they are insane. And every time I see a fire mage, I just want to re-roll into a fire mage and taste it for myself. But that's why there is a lot of genuinely interest on fire mage. It is very, very fun to play, and I feel like a lot of mages are actually going to play fire mages on the long run. Frost mages, they are S tier. I need to make a difference between them. Frost mages are very, very strong. They do have a lot of counters, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. If you're playing versus people that are actually doing crazy damage, it seems like you don't have the time to ramp up. But if you do have the time to ramp up, and if you do a great deep freeze, you can be very, very annoying. You can also double deep freeze if you're very, 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 very greedy with Cold Snap. But I mean, people notice it. Like, frost mages with their deep freeze is something very, very scary, and it does ruin the mana of other people. Especially spell steal is also super annoying for Retribution Paladins, because they become scared to freedom themselves. They become scared to actually avenging wrath at all on the whole match. Often you don't see paladins avenging wrath at all during the whole duration, except whenever they don't have mana to spell steal. But yeah, I mean, it's a very good spec, right? Arcane Mages, I'm going to put it in C tier for the same reasons as, let's say, Blood Assassination and Fury Warriors. They are alright, damage is alright, but it's not everything. I feel like they do miss the tankiness that, let's say, a Frost or a Fire Mage has. A Fire Mage has like Disarm, like it's super strong versus melees. Frost Mages, they have like double block. They could double block. So you see there is something going on. Also, Ice Barrier is super strong for Frost Mages. I always forget about it. But really, you have the tools to actually make it work as Arcane Mage, but in specific comps, and you're not going to carry the games. Of course, you have the damage. I think the damage will be better and better over the patches, but so does the other specs, and that's why it becomes very hard for them to actually come back from a lot of stuff. I feel like arcane mages are very good in twos because they do have more time to cast and to ramp up. But in trees, whenever you have to choose a target and you see our arcane mage, you know, look, no hard feelings. I'm going for you, and you're going to die eventually over the duration of the match. And that's why for me it's a C tier spec, and it is not like combat rogue tier of garbage, because again, you do have all the spells working as intended. While for example, combat rogue killing spree a team of trees is going to be very difficult to actually have good value, except whenever the people are like spread out. But then it means just that they are making a mistake and not making you look good. Actually, it's more on them than on you. Retribution Paladin. Let's talk about Retribution Paladin really quickly. They are good. They are very good in trees, I would say. For me, it's an 8 tier spec. It is better in trees than in twos, and it is even better in fives than in trees, because they do have Divine Sacrifice, they do have Hand of Sacrifice too, they have a lot of great tools to actually be super useful for the team. You also have crazy amounts of damage. I have Armageddon. I've made a guide of Retribution Paladin. If you really want to watch it and to learn how to play Retribution Paladin, you can check my guide. It's pretty bare bones, I would say. You can really understand something, and the gameplay will follow in the coming days, where I'm going to explain step by step what I mean with arenas with my Paladin. But I think it's a generally good class, good spec. It has good damage. It does like an interrupt. It does like a silence if you're not a blood elf. It does like the flexibility of doing Avenging Wrath and still being able to define shield. That is not happening. So that's why it becomes a very hard spec to play in trees, because you can get blown up. You need to think about the Avenging Wrath you're going to do. Retribution Paladin is also very nice because you do have a instant turn evil, and instantly turning evil the gargoyle is something you can really do and ruin the day of an unholy DK. And just in general, I feel like it's a great spec to play, and if you're willing to play Retribution Paladin, I feel like you're going to have a lot of fun. Holy Priest, I lied. I think it's also D tier. It's too easy to kill in trees. It's really easy to. I'm going to put it in C tier, because you still are a healer. You still have some things going on for you. The healing output is very good, but are you able to put that output into the actual match? Because you're going to get trained probably. You do miss pain suppression. You do miss a lot of tools to actually be competitive like a disc priest. Um, I feel like it's probably the worst healer out there, for good reasons. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have fun if you're playing Holy Priest. It just means like if you want to be competitive, it's probably better to go disc. Holy Paladin, for me, it's a S tier spec in trees. It is very strong. It has bubble, it has bop, it has freedoms, it has some good off healing, it has beacon of light to actually heal each other instantly. I think the problem with beacon of light is you're going to ruin a lot of mana by doing that. You do die really quickly as a holy paladin, but again, I think it's one of the best healers there is because of the utility. They also have some damage if they want to finish off a target. Avenging Wrath with Hammer of Wrath, Holy Shock, and Judgment can really one shot someone. um, but yeah, I mean, you see by itself, you see holy paladins, and then you see also disc priest, and those two are just S tier. Disc priest is also a very strong spec. It has a lot of damage. It has a lot of utility, I would say. Excuse me, don't have a lot of damage, but they have a lot of utility. They have a offensive dispel. They have also a defensive dispel. You have also the PI that they can give to any other target. They can also just be super useful with their pain suppression. It can make a target not die. Yeah, in general, it's a good spec. I think mana burning their enemies is also a win condition they can do with specific comps. But I feel like in general, Disc Priest and Holy Paladin deserve to be in the S tier spot. Resto Druid. Now that's very hard to judge. if I need to judge between the specs, I feel like it's the third best healer spec. But does it mean that it's really meta? I feel like it's between average and meta, but I'm going to put it in meta because like in A tier, because just in general, it is going to be good. But the problem is you're going to ruin your mana. You don't really have a lot of utility. Like for example, you don't have bear charge anymore. You do have Cyclone. Cyclone is a big offensive CC that you can do to any target, and that's actually very, very interesting. You can also hibernate the Feral Druids, for example, or you can hibernate a pet. Um, in general, you have also innervate, you have some hots, you can also heal while you're drinking, for example. So that's also interesting to do if you have time to drink in trees, which doesn't really happen as often. Um, but it misses the defensive capacities that a Disc Priest or Holy Paladin can have. And that's why for me it's a A tier spec. Let's talk about Resto Shaman first. Resto Shaman for me it's a B tier spec. It is really the fourth best healer. It seems like it's something good, but it's not really good. Um, the resilience levels are very, very low. It's not like an elemental shaman where whenever you're stunned, you get astral shift. That's not going to happen. You are going to get stunned and probably most likely die into the stun. And that's the problem for Resto Shaman. You have some utility, you have some off damage, you have the offensive dispel, but you don't have magic dispel. So you do need like playing with a Shadow Priest or with a Retribution Paladin to actually make it work, to actually dispel you, because if you get polymorphed, it is over. That's something that Resto Druid don't really need to fight against, because polymorph isn't effective on druids. They can just form out, even though they are like caught out of form. That doesn't matter. They can just shapeshift and they're good. And that's why for me, Resto Shamans they are B tier because they do have healing output. But is it possible to actually do the healing output? Like Holy Priest, it becomes very hard. They do have a lot of utility. They do have some great healing, instant healing with Earth Shield, but also Riptide, and just in general, whenever they're casting a heal, they can really do well. But I think it's very hard to survive in this current meta. Elemental Shaman S tier, I think it's very clear that it is very, very strong. It does crazy amounts of damage. It has also good off heal. It is also very tanky. It's hard to actually kill. Whenever they're stunned, they get Astral Shift. Whenever you're silencing them, they also get Astral Shift. So they have a lot of great tools to survive, but also a lot of great tools to do damage. They also have great comps. You can play with a warrior, you can play with a warlock. I also seen with a fire mage, also seen with a boomy. So you do have a lot of potential comps to play in. You can also me myself, I play with my friend, which is an elemental shaman, and we play Retribution Paladin with Elemental Shaman, and it seems that like we are surviving a lot of damage that maybe other comps would not survive. And also just in general, Elemental Shamans do benefit from having stuns in your team because you do have the potential to one-shot people if they are standing still, and that's why Elemental Shaman for me is probably the most S tier spec like caster wise. If I have to choose, the most S tier spec would be Arms Warrior for melees, the most S tier spec would be Elemental Shaman for casters and ranged. And for healers, I would say Disc Priest is probably over Holy Paladin. But for me, they are all on the same tier. Let's talk about Boomies. Boomies is not bad. I think it is just easily stopped. And outside of Starfall, you do have damage, but it becomes very hard to actually cast. I would say if I have to make a decision, it would be B tier because for me, it's not on the same level as Feral Druids, but also not on the same level as Fire Mage. I feel like Fire Mages have more tools to do damage at all times, while for example, Balance Druids, if they get stunned while star falling and they're trying to kite the starfall and the damage from boomies, it becomes very hard for them to actually come back in the game. But it is average because on certain maps they are really, really good because the knockback is something very precious in Wrath of the Lich King because the maps are not tuned well for knockbacks. If you're getting knockbacked from the bridge or from the Dalaran sewers, you're not going to have a great time if you're a melee. So that's why for me it is a B tier spec. Affliction Warlock, for me, it's currently A tier with good reasons. It has a lot of damage, but it still has to ramp up. It still has the need to have a lot of haste, the need of having a lot of gear to progress into the S tier spot. It will be S tier in a few patches, but on this patch, for me, it's an 8 tier spec. Remember, it's not like ranked from left to right. It's just, for me, it's on the same level, except let's say warriors and elemental shamans. For me, Affliction Warlock 8 tier has a lot of good comps. The possibilities to actually kill people are very, very high. But I feel like as an Affliction Warlock, you're going to have some struggles whenever you need to have instant damage at the right time. While, for example, Destruction Warlocks, where I'm going to discuss it right away, it is a S tier spec increase. Although it can get focused down, it has a lot of good anti-caster properties. It has also Succubus or the Fell Hunter, depending on the comps. And you also have instant CC with the instant stun, Death Coil, Mortal Coil. So you do have time to actually cast, especially in trees. Whenever you're playing with Elemental Shaman, they will have a struggle. They will have a bad time to actually deal with you two. And that's why for me, Destruction Warlocks, they are S tier. They could be very close with Affliction Warlock, but I need to make the separation. I feel like Destruction in this current season is very good, but it will get overtaken by Affliction very soon whenever the patches are coming out. I would say the phases, but for me it's the same. Patch or phase, it's the same. Demonology Warlock, I would say C tier. It is easily kiteable whenever they are demon form. It is interesting, I would say, because you can win games because it's still a warlock, right? But I don't feel like it's D tier, but I also don't feel like it's B tier. So for me, it's underpowered. Like the other specs, they can work in specific comps, but they are not going to carry that set comp. I think Affliction and Destruction are just that much better, and that's for me, it's a C tier spec. Shadow Priest, they are A tier, the same as Affliction Warlock. They need to ramp up, so they will become better and better. But for now, it is A tier because they don't have the amounts of haste. They are very squishy, so they do die really quickly, and that's why for me they need a lot more resilience to actually make it work. But it has a defensive dispel, it has a offensive dispel, it has a lot of damage. It becomes very hard to deal with whenever they're playing with an Affliction Warlock or even with a Rogue. By itself, it is a great spec, but also great class. I feel like priests are very, very strong in general, and it just shows how much damage it can do. Like whenever you're very low HP, you don't have a comeback because they will just shadow word death and you're dead, right? So that's why for me it's an 8 tier spec. It's very good, very strong, very useful, but also very, very dangerous. Enhancement Shaman is for me B tier. It has good comps, it has good damage, but it is not as easily accessible as the other specs. It doesn't mean that it's bad, it doesn't mean that it's good. Again, it's average. It can work with great comps. You can make it work with a warrior, you can make it work with a hunter, which is Beast Cleave. You can make it work with a lot of specs, but it has the tools to actually die really quickly in season 5. It becomes better with the patches, with the phases. But for me, at the moment, it deserves a B tier spot. It does a lot of damage though, so be very, very wary whenever you're facing an Enhancement Shaman. But it is manageable, not like the next seasons wherever you will see an Enhancement Shaman actually popping off. So this is my tier list for this current phase season, I would say. Season 5 is a very fun season, but it will actually become better in season 6, season 7, and then it becomes a bit more hard to deal with whenever they have like crazy trinkets, crazy damage, crazy weapons. So for me, this is my tier list. I hope you guys understand or appreciate this tier list. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think about that tier list. Comment below what you think about the specs, what specs you're playing, and are you playing a lot of arenas? Are you not playing a lot of arenas? Do you have some great Nax gear going on? Me, myself, I'm doing Nax every week with my Paladin and soon with my Hunter, and I'm very, very satisfied with current Wrath of the Lich King Classic. I'm very, very happy with that. And also for Dragonflight coming up very soon, like I'm very stoked because my channel will do better on Dragonflight. That's just a fact. But thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Again, stay safe and be sure to like the video if you really like the video because it helps me a lot. And we will catch each other very soon in a next video. Have a great day. Bye.